You're watching 12 WKRC-TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. In the mid-1990s, federal and state governments carried out the most sweeping transformation of the American welfare system since it was created in the 1930s. In Hamilton County, the changes have been dramatic. For example, in 1995, over 53,600 people, or 1 in every 16 county residents, received some form of cash assistance. In 2000, the number fell to slightly more than 21,200, or 1 in 40 residents. In 1995, over $74.5 million was paid out, while in 2000, the total dropped to $32.7 million. A similar pattern can be seen in the food stamp program. In 1995, over 97,000 people received almost $87 million in food stamps. By 2000, both those figures were cut by more than 50%, with 46,000 people receiving $40.8 million in food stamps. Responsibility for overseeing the implementation of this dramatic transformation in Hamilton County fell to the director of the Department of Human Services. Don Thomas has led the department since 1987 and recently announced his intention to retire later this year. I have invited Mr. Thomas to join me this morning. Don, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks. It's my pleasure.
You know, you got into the field of social work a little over 30 years ago. What motivated you then? What was it like? What was the field like at the time?
I think what motivated me was the desire to try to do good and help other people. I think that's why most people enter into the social work profession. I think the feeling there was differently. I recall experiences visiting homes as a caseworker and having people say, "Well, I know I'm eligible for $40 worth of food stamps, but I only want 10, or whatever." And I think we moved from there to a period of I'm entitled to everything, I want it all, and now we're moving back, again to a more conservative approach.
Was part of that, at the time that you entered, 1970, coming off of the 60s, early 70s, war on poverty, really this sense that somehow the government could play a role to actually break the cycle of poverty, to really change things?
I think that was the goal, to try to change people's lives, to move them from welfare to a work environment. But I think while the ideas were great, the tools that government agencies had at that point in time were really handouts. Here's some cash, go use this cash to support your family, and come back in 6 months and see us. And that was a policy that obviously failed.
And as a person who was in that profession and there because you wanted to help people, how soon did you begin to sense that there was some problem with the system? Or is that something that the system changed and it became a problem?
I recall kind of a crowning event. A gentleman came into my office. I had a discussion with him about aid, and one of the more experienced workers, we were in a small building, said, he had a real bad limp and bad back, and I felt a lot of empathy. And one of the experienced workers said to me, "Hey, Don, come to the window and watch this." And so I watched this old gentleman limp and with great pain go down the steps, and when he was 50 yards away, walk in a normal stride. And that, I think, was earth-shaking for me in seeing that at least some individuals were playing a game with the system.
A lot of people, in terms of the changes that have taken place, finally implemented on a federal level back in '95, a lot of politicians on both sides of the aisle have claimed responsibility. And, they may have different interpretations about what it means, but they've claimed responsibility. What about for the professionals in the profession itself, in the human services area? How much input did you have as a profession into transforming the system and changing the system?
I think, particularly in the state of Ohio, we had a lot of input. For years, people in the profession were saying we have to have more tools, we have to hold those who receive benefits accountable, we have to have expectations that they will go to work and that they will will work with us to try to do something with their lives that is meaningful. And I think to their credit, the Ohio General Assembly, and at that point Governor Voinovich heard us, and they really put in place in some ways some welfare reform really before the federal government did. But then when the federal government did, that just kind of added teeth and ability to effectively move people from welfare to work.
And this moving people from welfare to work, this has become the phrase about the new system.
Right.
But are you telling me that from a person who worked in the field, this was always the goal? This is what you always said?
Well, no. As I said, initially the goal was just to give people money and help them. Okay. And I think in my own experience, I saw fairly quickly that was probably the wrong thing to do. And it took a long time, I think, for our policymakers to get to the point to also realizing that was the wrong thing to do.
Let's talk about this dramatic change, and we had the numbers up on the screen
Yes.
as we got started. And as I mentioned to you, numbers don't do real well
Right.
on TV.
Right.
They sort of flash past. One of the things that I wanted to raise, though, that buried in those numbers are some numbers that made me wonder. So, for example, in the cash assistance area, in 1995, 38,000 plus children in Hamilton County were receiving some sort of cash assistance.
Right.
In the year 2000, that number had fallen from 38,000 plus to 16,000 plus.
Correct. Correct.
What's happened to those children? I mean, are there worries built into these numbers too? Could we really eliminate that many children receiving cash assistance and still know that children are being taken care of?
Well, children are generally attached to a parent or to parents. The number I like to think about, which roughly coincides with those years, is going from about 19,000 parents on welfare to about 4,500. Those people did not all get rich and leave the system. I suspect most of them are struggling to make ends meet. On the other hand, I think more importantly, they send a message to their children that we don't get up once a month and go down to the mailbox and get the welfare check, but rather we have some personal responsibility to support ourselves and our family. And I think that will be the long-term success of welfare reform.
So you're telling me that you believe at this point that people are out there, parents, adults are out there working. They may be struggling, but they're working, and those, almost 20,000 children, they are covered.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are difficulties, but we offer child care, we offer medical care, we offer a whole bunch of what I would call supportive services to low-income people to make it possible for them to work. Again, the long-term goal is really to change the mindset.
Back in October, Ohio reached the point where there were time limits, and
Correct.
People began to roll off of the benefit
Correct.
rolls. They had to be taken off. Now, in Hamilton County, because we did a number of shows around that time, the numbers were actually very small. How many families have actually been removed because they just ran out of time?
I don't know that I know the exact figure, but I think it's around 500 total since that point in time.
So that's still very low compared
Yes,
with sort of the fears back in 95, 96 when the system was created.
Right. In 95 or 96, it was going to be you're going to wipe out 18 or 19,000 families.
And why is that? What happened?
We have worked real hard in our agency, but I have to give great credit to the private social services agencies we've partnered with in moving people from welfare to work as quickly as possible. We've tried to send the message that people should look at their benefits as an insurance policy for times when something happens and they really do lose a job, or for times when the economic conditions would really go sour. And we have encouraged them to get out and work now, and have done whatever we can to do that. And our private partners have done a wonderful job in assisting us.
You know, those dramatic numbers are all using 2000 numbers. 2001's economically a different year than a year ago this time. Are you seeing more people out of work? Are you seeing people who were in these entry-level positions now facing layoffs?
We hear those stories. Our numbers really have not changed dramatically.
So you haven't been able to statistically see the impact of the economic slowdown.
I mean, I think, you know, for a long time we had month after month of reductions. We had a couple of months where we had a little blip up, but the blip I'm talking about are in the 50s or maybe 100, and so what I would describe it as we're kind of on a straight line with the number of people receiving assistance.
Do you worry about the economic environment right now, though?
It is always a concern, because certainly the people that we are putting to work tend to be on the margin in terms of having skills and abilities. I think right now our economy is still rather healthy. There are still help wanted signs everywhere, and as long as that continues to be the economic conditions, I think we'll be fine.
You know, I know an area that you've got a personal interest in is the whole child welfare, child abuse area. And Hamilton County Department of Human Services is an agency that really takes on lots of different responsibilities. It's not just welfare in its traditional sense. This whole area of child welfare, child abuse, where do we stand in that? What are the issues that are driving that right now? What are the concerns of that area?
Just to kind of transition, one of the great concerns was as we cut off welfare recipients, that their children would go hungry and starve and they would be abused and neglected. We haven't really seen a lot of that, which I think is very fortunate. I think the big issues that confront child welfare are, first, what do you do with the kids who are very, very expensive? You know, there are kids that the county actually has to pay $400 to $500 a day for their care and custody, because they are so troubled psychologically and physically, perhaps mentally retarded, you know, multiple things. So that is number one. What are we going to do with these very, very, very troubled, very, very expensive kids? I think the second issue is, how can we continue to spread the word to families to seek help before they abuse? Oftentimes we are called in after the fact, and you know, then there are legal problems and so forth. And there are a number of fine private agencies that provide services to families that are in trouble, but before they have...
For example, what kind of agencies, I know you can't be exhaustive here, what kind of agencies and what kind of services might a family call upon if they contacted you, if, you know, one or another person or a neighbor thinks there may be abuse going on?
Well, there are a number of mental health agencies. Beach Acres is well known, Lighthouse is well known, Family Services is well known, and you know, and I've just kind of touched the tip. There is a whole host of wonderful private agencies in this community. We are blessed with them, and you know, the fabric of our community is made much richer because of the services they provide.
Now, am I correct that a lot of those private agencies, they administer programs that do receive government funding?
Correct.
It's not all private dollars.
Correct. Correct.
So you're partnering with them to actually deliver some of the services that you want to see.
Exactly. For example, we contract with the Children's Home to do all of our adoption work. You know, we contract with a number of agencies to provide foster care or to provide institutional placement for kids who are troubled. We contract with a number of agencies to provide preventative services.
Now, I know there's federal dollars and there's state dollars, but there's also local dollars, and don't we have a levy coming up?
Yes, we do. There is a local tax levy that will be before the voters this fall, the Children's Services levy. We believe that it'll be flat, so that it won't be a tax increase.
So it's a renewal.
It is a renewal, but we hope that the public will support that.
Let me ask another area, and that is child support. This system has changed a lot.
Yes, it has.
Been in the news. It's the payment now comes out of Columbus. There's been a lot of backlog and screw-ups. Where do we stand on that system, and what role does the local, your department have with that?
Locally at this point, what we do is establish paternity, locate absent parents, establish court orders. We do that in conjunction with the courts. The state has taken on the payment problems and the payment system, and there have been problems. At this point, I would say they're at about a 75% level. The problems are certainly less than they were 5 or 6 months ago, and as I talk to my staff, they are making steady progress. So my hope would be in the next 5 or 6 months that most of the bugs will be ironed out.
Am I correct that in other states they have the system that we are struggling with in Ohio, and it runs okay? What's the problem here?
Well, different states have had varying problems. For example, the state of California pulled the plug on theirs, and they just said to the federal government, give us the sanctions, we can't do this. And it has been, by and large, the large, urban, high-population states that have had more problems. Obviously, somewhere like North Dakota, where their population is less than Hamilton counties, can bring up a system far easier.
Don, we only have about 30 seconds left. Where do you go from here? I know you're retiring,
yes,
but you're younger than I am, so what are you going to do?
We are moving to Florida. My wife is joining the University of Florida, and I'm planning to do private consulting in human services areas, so I'm sure it will bring me back to Cincinnati in some way, some fashion here or there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your role in our community since 1987, and for your role, especially over the last few years, in implementing this new change. Good luck in the future.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Okay. Stay tuned. After the break, a little beauty, a little history, all for Mother's Day. Welcome back. Every year on this Mother's Day weekend in mid-May, tens of thousands of us head to the greenhouses and garden centers in search of bedding plants that will give color to our yards for the next 4 or 5 months. Last year, I had the opportunity to work with the Delhi Historical Society to produce a video history of the floral and greenhouse business in the Western Hills area. Here's a portion of that video.
We used to work this with mules years ago.
George and Tom Ritter are one of the last links to the way thousands of residents of Delhi and Green townships made their living in the 19th and early 20th centuries. When Tom's grandfather bought this 25-acre farm in 1887 along Hillside Avenue, it lay entirely within the boundaries of Delhi Township. Today, this vegetable farm straddles Delhi and the Cincinnati neighborhood of Sailor Park.
We had chickens, we had hogs we used to kill every year, and we had 2 mules we worked the farm with, plus an old Fortune tractor.
Above the Ritter farm on the hilltops of Delhi, life followed the same agricultural rhythms.
On Anderson Ferry Road from Delhi to Foley Road, you probably would have seen 5 homes. The rest of it would have been farming.
Bob Maddox, the owner of the Delhi Garden Center, comes from one of Delhi's oldest farming families, the Witterstatters. His great-grandmother's home, now the headquarters of the Delhi Historical Society, sits on busy Anderson Ferry Road.
A lot of the were truck crops, were vegetable crops. They weren't the big grain farms or anything like. A lot of cattle, a lot of horses.
Clint Seitz grew up on his family's 36-acre vegetable farm on Rapid Run Road. Born in 1918, he straddled the horse-drawn and motorized eras.
Yes, I have plowed with mules. It isn't a very good sight right in front of you to see the tail end of 2 mules, but they do the job much better than horses because they seem to walk straighter, and if you can control them, they do an excellent job.
Every summer, the Seitz fields brimmed with vegetables, which his father trucked down to the commission houses on the Cincinnati riverfront. He usually returned home with a load of manure.
Well, we really didn't notice it. We handled manure so often that it didn't really matter. I mean, we handled the manure from our mules and from the cows that we had on the farm, and we also hauled very much manure which was necessary to grow these vegetable crops.
In 1912, Clint's father and grandmother began constructing a series of greenhouses. Ultimately, they put 3 acres under glass.
For 39 years, we grew only 2 crops of tomatoes. That's all we grew. We marketed tomatoes in 8-pound baskets, and we would grow about 10,000 baskets of tomatoes per acre. That'd be 30,000 baskets in the spring crop. And then the fall crop, due to the fact that we had shorter days and the crop was shorter, we would probably grow about half that amount.
But what set a core of Delhi growers apart from the other truck farmers who ringed Cincinnati was their increasing concentration on growing flowers, beginning in the 1870s. Linus Salehorse's father discovered the potential profit in flowers.
He was the engineer for the incline, Price Hill incline, and his dad was a farmer. See? So he asked his dad if he could grow a row of flowers alongside a potato patch. And when he got done, he made more money out of that one row of plants, one row of flowers, than Grandpa made out of the whole field of potatoes.
Between the mid-1870s and 1920, farmers erected modern steel and glass greenhouses over hundreds of acres of Delhi and Green Township farmland. Western Hills fruit and vegetable farmers took their crops to Finley and Court Street markets and the wholesale commission houses. Flower growers also took their crops downtown to the Jabez Elliott Market on 6th Street, built in 1894. This was the only public market in the United States devoted exclusively to cut flowers.
He took a lot of flowers back in the early 1900s down to the 6th Street Flower Market down there. He would take them down on they'd leave like about 4 o'clock in the morning, take them down on a horse and a wagon down Delhi Pike and spend the whole day down there. It was a very long day, but most of his customers were people that came in and bought the flowers in downtown Cincinnati.
The Delhi floral growers became respected regionally and nationally as leaders in their profession. In 1889, several helped found the Cincinnati Florist Association. Richard Witterstatter became nationally known as the Carnation King for his work. The prominence of the Delhi growers helped attract the national show of the Society of American Florists to Cincinnati in 1909.
This is the old-fashioned way. So I've been around here since 1938. Everything has changed. Everything has changed. When my dad built this place in 25, he put the whole range in carnations. Well, they had a bad luck, and they all died, and then he went into snapdragons. Then he finally decided to go into these bedding plants. They've done away with cut flowers in this country. It's all shipped in. Everybody's in the bedding plants and pot plants.
At one time, the growers in Western Hills concentrated almost exclusively on cut flowers.
We used to grow a lot of them in Delhi. Well, this is one of the last crops in Delhi.
We used to raise carnations and snapdragons, pompons, or daisy-type pompons, and we even grown a lot outside. But as years went on, they got cheaper from South America, and that's where a lot of them are being shipped in from now.
The Robin family on Pedretti Road is one of the few who still grows a significant variety of cut flowers, both for their florist shop and for wholesale florists elsewhere. In early spring, it is Austin Marias, enchantment lilies, and snapdragons. Later, it will be iris, sunflowers, and delphiniums.
We're one of the very few greenhouses / florists that can go into the back of the greenhouses, cut them, and then retail them out that same hour and send them out for the freshness, the quality to our consumer.
I like to grow snaps and see how big we can get them in that, and stem length and everything.
As family businesses now in their 3rd and 4th generations, every Delhi grower holds on to a trace of their family's past. At Witterstatter's Garden Center, it's hydrangeas.
Part of it, I think, is my father. It's one he likes to grow. For color and for splash, you can't find hardly anything that will give you that much of an umph a blast of color. It's a great product to have.
But there is no doubt that today, for Delhi growers, selling bedding plants for people's yards and gardens is the centerpiece of their business.
Basically, probably 80 to 90% of the money that garden centers and greenhouse people make that are actually profits are in the springtime.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Have a good week.
A lot of it you'll find it's family-run businesses, and you got to love the work. If you don't love the work, it's not the work for you.
The growing flowers is something that gets in your blood and something that you really love to do. You can see what Mother Nature can do to a plant, and you can watch a plant develop from a little baby.